Shalum. Shalom and welcome. Welcome to White Rose family. My name is Symmanayah, and these are the words I'm compelled to present before an awakening nation. Yashar'al, this is the 77th installment of White Rose family. And I want to bring some things to your attention before I get on the topic of budding points. Explaining this focus, this topic, budding points. Do you believe it's wise for a person to go repair something without any tools? Do you believe it's possible to clean up something, to refine something or someone without the proper tools or utensils or things that are necessary to make that thing clean? Yashar'al, I want you to be mindful that the rainbow was created by the Almighty Father Yahuah to reflect his covenant that he will not flood the entire planet again. So do not be misled to think that these colors that I present represent anything but a reminder of the covenant that the Almighty Father had for us. Also remember that the Almighty Yahuah is the beginning and the end, and it's the wicked ones that take things that are set apart and pervert them. Again, do not be deceived by false witnesses regarding the colors that are used. There are various core things as we are awakened, O Yashar'al, that are neglected. And there are core things that are spoken of. Like you hear people speak of all the time, obey his 10 commandments, his laws and statutes. But you don't hear one speaking of how do we discipline this earthen vessel, this flesh that war against the spirit. How do we bring it into subjection to walk consistently in obeying the 10 commandments, his laws and statutes? And I submit to you, his laws and statutes just does not stop with what you see written, for he is a living Almighty One. And as a living Almighty One, he gives us orders and instructions. Laws and statutes, my brothers and sisters, are instructions, are directives. To disregard, to rebel against them is plain wicked and evil. And just as those are written instructions that are made alive, remember, the letter kills and it's the spirit that makes alive. So it is with our interactions. Him working in us, through us, one towards another, as his spirit stirs our spirit and we bring these earthen vessels into subjection. We must learn the tools that are necessary to walk in discipline, to walk being filled with the spirit. And I submit to you, one of the core things that you hear people talking about are the feast times, the 7 major feast times. And I want to read something to you, my brothers and sisters, to explain to you that the 7 major feast times, though there is the literal instructions that we read in Leviticus, to those whose spirit are trained to hear and identify and discern, there's a purpose behind each of the 7 feast times, and I've spoken of this. Let me share something with you, my brothers and sisters, before you reject how I believe that there's a purpose within the 7 feast times that can be passed on from generation to generation, whether we are in the promised land or are in captivity. It is a practice, it is a set of instructions that can be used to vet ourselves and one another as we find ourselves being pressed to come together during these end times. My brothers and sisters, the feast times. If you read in Leviticus 23rd chapter, you'll see what is said about the feast times. From Passover to unleavened bread, to first fruits, to harvest, to trumpets, to atonement, to tabernacle or booth. Each of these 7 feasts present step by step how we can examine ourselves and one another as we find ourselves coming together during these end times. So read the 23rd chapter of Leviticus. Read about the feast times. Now, I want to bring your attention, if you're struggling, why I say there's a purpose within the feast times. You see, I speak often of keeping the scriptures whole. In other words, scriptures that might seem to conflict, we can discern what the Spirit of Yahuah have to say so that they do not conflict. Leviticus 23rd chapter bring us the feast times, my brothers and sisters, the set apart feast times. So are they not given by the Almighty Father? Indeed, they are. Do they have purpose? In more ways than we can imagine, my brothers and sisters. So, the Almighty Father gave us feast times. Now I want to read something to you, my brothers and sisters. I want to read Amos 5th chapter. Come with me to the 5th chapter of Amos, verse 18 through 21. And we read, woe to you who are longing for the day of Yahuah. What does the day of Yahuah mean to you? It is darkness and not light. As when a man flees from a lion and a bear shall meet him, or entered his house, rested his hand on the wall, and the serpent shall bite him. Is not the day of Yahuah darkness and not light? Is not very dark with no brightness in it? I have hated, I have despised your festivals, and I am not pleased with your assemblies. Again, Amos 5:21, I have hated, I have despised your festivals, and I am not pleased with your assemblies. Yashar'al, we have the feast days. We have the instructions that have been given us. And we see here in Amos where he talks about despising the festivals, despising the feasts. And you might say, well, what's happening here? Didn't he give us the feast? Why is he despising the feast? If you examine the scripture thoroughly, you'll see, my brothers and sisters, what he's saying is it's not just about gathering and eating. It's not just about the festivities. You must understand the dynamics, the reason behind what I have given you. And if you search the scriptures, my brothers and sisters, what takes priority are the spiritual attributes that lead us into better worship and obedience to the Almighty Father. Our physical dynamics are contributors towards a better worship, a better experience. So I believe, my brothers and sisters, that the Almighty Father is saying it's not just about coming together and eating. It's not just about the festivals. You must look and see that there is more to it that I instructed you in Leviticus 23rd chapter. With that said, my brothers and sisters, I want to get into letting you know once again, and I repeat it, that the 7 major feast times is like a vetting tool. It's like a toolbox that you can take to clean your act up, to clean my act up, our act up. Passover, instructions, being able to discern instructions from the Almighty Father that leads to life and growing in life everlasting. Unleavened bread. So we have the instructions, but it's important that we're able to discern the difference between good and evil, thus unleavened bread. First fruits. Some will get things quicker than others, so do not panic, do not get in an uproar. Be prepared to discern when others get it before another. Let us work and walk in fellowship with patience, knowing that it will come. First fruits. And I've used black as going from blackness to life for Passover. I've used blue for the word, discerning between right and wrong, and I use green to present to you that first fruit, that first green budding, that budding point where some will get things. Sometimes you'll get things before others receive it. Now, there are those that will use the excuse, some get it before others, but when you're presenting truth that is simple and blatant, such as the name of Yahusha versus that pagan term, that doesn't take, it takes me a while to get it. There are some things that you can receive right away, and there are some things that require research, thorough vetting. My brothers and sisters, let me ask you something. Do you think one can reach maturity without budding? In other words, the scriptures use examples of us as being a tree planted by the rivers of water. That tree started with a seed that budded, or a vine that started with a seed that budded. If you are one who have ever planted more than one seed, you probably recognize some seeds, or that second seed or the first seed. One of them will bud before the other. And if you planted multiple seeds, some will bud quicker than others, thus first fruits. Isn't that a degree of encouragement to see the seeds budding, the budding points, the first fruits? And then we recognize that the more seeds bud, it builds towards the harvest, thus the Feast of Harvest. And when you see a harvest, a field of ready to harvest fruit, vegetables, or grain, much encouragement is there, O Yashar'al. And excitement comes, thus the Feast of Trumpets. In our excitement, we make known the works of the Almighty Father. In our excitement, we proclaim the judgment of the Almighty Father, that we're able to judge and see that that harvest is indeed ready to be harvested. We proclaim judgment, knowing that more and more is coming from the Almighty Father for correction, for refinement. Yashar'al, O Yashar'al. And in that excitement, we will stumble and we will fall. And thus the Feast of Atonement, being renewed by the blood of the Lamb, knowing when to ask for forgiveness, when to recognize how seeking forgiveness, repenting of our mistakes, yielding to correction, it is through the blood of the Lamb we are renewed. And then the Feast of Booth, the Feast of Tabernacle. We would have learned from instructions to life, discerning good and evil, getting things quicker than others, seeing others come together, the growth and maturity of Yashar'al, knowing that in our stumbling and fall, seeing others come together with excitement, we proclaim, we make known, trumpets. Atonement, we stumbled and fall out of so much excitement, but we are renewed by the blood of the Lamb. And tabernacle, now we know the dynamics, the makeup of this person, this individual in the mirror, and another brother or sister. Pray, my brothers and sisters. There are stages to a seed, budding points. If we got to the point where we disregard the buds that sprouted first, we may miss out on some encouragement knowing that the Most High is working. The same with an individual. In other words, if a brother or sister receives something from the Almighty Father through his set-apart spirit sent in Yahusha's name, let us make sure we're able to discern whether that is indeed from the Spirit of Abba Yahuah. But if we ignore those budding points, we miss out on the encouragement that the Almighty Father is working in us and through us. Budding points, sprouts, first fruits, dynamics of things that contribute to our awakening and the strengthening, as well as the coming together of a set-apart nation. Let me read this before I continue on the focus of budding points, my brothers and sisters. Warning and disclaimer. The information contained in White Robes family represent instructions and warnings to individuals who believe they are drawn by the Almighty Creator Yahuah to Yahusha Mashyach. Referencing John 6:44. The content presented centers around end-time realities. Please be advised, this site is not intended for children under 16 years of age to be compliant with various media platforms. By continuing forward, you agree to hold Symmanayah harmless of any influence or actions that arise as a result of watching, listening, in or viewing the content presented. The views expressed do not reflect the owners, management, and or shareholders of this media platform. Please note, I am not affiliated with anyone or organization with similar names. Yashar'al, O Yashar'al. Budding points. Let us begin to clear our glasses. Let us begin to open our eyes. Let us begin to use the Spirit within, guided by the Spirit of the Almighty Father. And let us, O Yashar'al, come together and know what is expected. Let us identify the budding points, the breakthroughs, the things that bring about first response, quick response, and set apartness. Allow me to present the following, my brothers and sisters. The 13th chapter of Matthew. Matthew 13, verse 3 through 9. He says here, and he spoke to them much in parable, saying, see, the sower went out to sow. Sow is another word for plant, my brothers and sisters. As he sowed, some indeed fell by the wayside, and the birds came and devoured them. Others fell on rocky ground, rocky places, where they did not have much soil, and immediately they sprang up because they had no depth of soil. But when the sun was up, they were scorched, and because they had no root, they withered. And others fell among thorns, and the thorns came up and choked them. And others fell on good soil and yielded a crop, some 100-fold, some 60. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. My brothers and sisters, if you read the rest of this, chapter 13th in Matthew, the parable is explained. And as you can see, there are details, there are processes that must be adhered to, my brothers and sisters. We don't just spring up as mature, set apart ones. There's a growth, there's a process, and there are obstacles, there are challenges. Let us seek to discern all that is said regarding this. There's more regarding budding points. Consider Matthew 13, 18 through 23. He said, you then hear the parable of the sower. When anyone hears the word of the rain and does not understand it, then the wicked one comes and snatches away what is sown in his heart. This is that sown by the wayside. So, my brothers and sisters, with all due respect, we need to seek understanding. The instructions to life as it relates to Passover. Understanding to discern between right or wrong as it relates to Feast of Unleavened Bread. Knowing that some will get it quicker than others. And those who get it quicker, those budding points, those who break through, those who are first responders to discerning what the Spirit is saying, they will aid in bringing understanding. So it is important to understand. Notice it says, when anyone hears the word of the rain and does not understand. So let us seek understanding, my brothers and sisters. He goes on to say, and that which is sown on rocky places, this is he who hears the word and immediately receive it with joy. Yet he has no root in himself, but is short-lived. And when the pressure of persecution arises because of the word, immediately he stumbles. There are those who receive the word. There are those who come to understand, my brothers and sisters. And as a result, some of them are quick to start wanting to teach, wanting to be a moray, a teacher, or take on a position of influence. They heard it. They got excited. They understood some of it in part. And they were so excited. But they didn't have a foundation, a root within them. And when pressures come, situations come, they stumble. Look around. How many brothers you see that when hardship came, how many brothers have you seen since this COVID-19 has spread across the planet? How many brothers that were influential or teachers or mores or leaders are stumbling because they don't know what to do? I ask this question, my brothers and sisters, and I'll ask it again and again. Are you satisfied with your moray, your teacher, your leader, your pastor? Are you giving you the instructions that helps you to be rooted in the living word of the Almighty Father? It goes on to say, and that sown among the thorns is he who hears the word And the worry of this age and the deceit of riches choke the word and it becomes fruitless. How many individuals have stumbled because of the riches, the wealth, the prosperity, what they have, their possession? I've seen some people talk more about how they were prepared for COVID or what they need and the things they want or the things that they have, with more discussion on what I have or what I have not, or you should have listened to me, than talking about what we are to do to press forward. Let us seek out those who provide the instructions that gives us strength, individually and collectively. He goes on to say, and that sown on the good soil is he who hears the word and understands it, who indeed bears fruit and yield. See, they not only understood it, but they understood the value of the soil. They understood how fruit came to be in its yields. And they witnessed 100-fold in Psalm 60 and Psalm 30. Yashar'al budding points. It begins with encouragement and growth, recognizing what is active before us. I want to say to you also, my brothers and sisters, knowing the connections from seed to harvest is important. Let me present to you the 7th chapter of Matthew, verse 15 through 20. The 7th chapter of Matthew, verse 15 through 20. It reads, but beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are savage wolves. By their fruits you shall know them. Are grapes gathered from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? My brothers and sisters, let us be able to examine thoroughly, vet thoroughly. And like I said, the 7 major feast times is a vetting tool, is as a toolbox, it's as the utensils for examining the one in the mirror daily, as well as those whom we come in contact and in fellowship with. It says, so every good tree yields good fruit, but a rotten tree yields wicked fruit. A good tree is unable to yield wicked fruit, and a rotten tree to yield good fruit. Can we examine the trees? You see, my brothers and sisters, the vetting tool is important. Let me continue this before I say more on it. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. So then, by their fruits you shall know them. My brothers and sisters, there are individuals who will pat themselves on the back because they've built a community. There are individuals that will pat themselves on the back because they have so many followers, subscribers. There are individuals that will pat them on the back because they have a flock. But I say to you, are you satisfied with the leaders that you have? Are they teaching you as the Spirit of Yahuah works in them to teach you? Are you growing in maturity and set apartness under these leaders, under these teachers, under the mores, under the pastors or bishops or community heads who profess to be showing fruit? Are they spending more time talking about the fruit that they yielded behind them yesterday? Are they tooting themselves on the, or are they tooting their own horns and patting themselves on the back as though it belongs to them? My brothers and sisters, do you really believe a person is walking in the fullness of the Spirit of Yahusha Mashyach, tooting their own horn? It's time to recognize your position, their position. Recognize what is necessary to bring about correction. If they yield to correction and reproof, hallelujah. But if they try to defend their actions and want to talk about more about what they did yesterday and looking back on the plow, something that is frowned upon in Scripture, something is wrong. Yashar'al or Yashar'al, budding points, recognizing the breakthroughs of set apartness, recognizing the corrections that come, the things that will refine us and prepare us for the emergence of the 144,000, of which you may be a part of that group, or the great multitude of many nations, kindreds, and tongues. Together, we will be under the banner of Yashar'al. Each of the 12 tribes will be represented as Revelation 7 chapter mentions. And the names will be identified, acknowledged, and once that's fulfilled, the togetherness as one nation, Yashar'al, the banner that's spoken of in Isaiah 11:12, will come to be. And there will be martyrs for Yahusha's name, and there will be those that will shelter in place and fulfill various other duties as end times ramp up, and as we witness the final exodus coming together. End times will prove there will be times for protecting budding points. In other words, breakthroughs. Let us identify, oh, that's something I didn't know. That's something I didn't hear. That's something I did not understand. Let us recognize the importance of the soul, the richness of what is given to us by the Almighty Father. And let us recognize the seeds that bud forward with things that we may not have been told, or maybe have been told, but Yahusha is given the increase. Let us recognize, my brothers and sisters, the importance. There are those who will bear false witness about individuals who come into things that are breakthroughs, that are budding points. I've seen leaders say, oh, they're wrong. I've seen leaders want to spend more time saying, oh, well, let's get to the Hebrew. And brothers and sisters are deceived because they don't ask, well, what Hebrew are you talking about? The pictorial? The pure language? Modern Hebrew, which is Aramaic influence? Yiddish? Or some other variant? Brothers and sisters are being deceived thinking that, well, let's get into the Hebrew. And then they explain and they try to tell you what they believe the Hebrew is, only to come back to English. Or if you're Spanish, only come back to Spanish. Or if you're Japanese, only come back to Japanese. You see, it's naive to think that there aren't different languages speaking about set apartness. It's naive to think. When you search the scriptures, the emphasis is on preserving the name. There are emphasis on the name that a person received from the Almighty Father Yahuah. But there aren't any scriptures that tell us to start studying the pure lip. There's a scripture that says we will return to it one day. And I submit to you, my brothers and sisters, what's being thrown about to make you think that a person is more closer to our native culture is a deception. There's nothing wrong with history, but speak the specifics. Let me say what the Hebrew is saying using modern Hebrew. My brothers and sisters, it's important for us to understand the dynamics of what's happening, what's occurring. Protecting budding points, identifying breakthroughs. My brothers and sisters, come with me. I want you to know the role of set-apart leaders. Consider these words. John 21:15-17 says, when therefore they have eaten breakfast, Yahusha said to Shimon Kepha, or Simon Peter, son of Yonah, do you love me more than these? Now notice Yahusha is speaking to one individual at this time. He said to him, yes, master, you know that I love you. He said to him, feed my lambs. First, he wants to identify, do you love me? And if you're saying you love me, feed my lambs. He said to him a second time, Shimon, son of Yonah, do you love me? And he said to him, yes, master, you know that I love you. He said to him, shepherd my sheep. And he said to him a third time, and Shimon, son of Yonah, do you love me? Kepha was sad because he said to him the third time, do you love me? And he said to him, master, you know all. You know that I love you. And Yahusha said to him, feed my sheep. You see, my brothers and sisters, it is important for us to recognize that it begins with loving the Almighty Father. It begins with knowing his word manifest before us. It begins with loving him, sending his spirit in Yahusha's name. It begins with loving Yahusha. For it is the Almighty Father that gives life to anyone, our child, our mother, our brother, or relative, or anyone that we see outside of us, as well as us. It is by his word that we live. And if we love the giver of life, that's where it should begin. For in that love, our worship and obedience should function. And in that worship and obedience, we demonstrate set apartness. This is a means in which we are feeding the lambs or the sheep. Set apart leaders should be feeding. There's a time to guide. There's a time to serve. Know the role of set apart leaders, my brothers and sisters. They should also be protecting budding points. Know the shepherds and the sheep, my brothers and sisters. And sometimes they may be interchangeable. For when the Spirit of Yahushua picks someone to speak through, that person for the moment may speak in the voice of a shepherd, the voice of Yahushua. In other words, there are times we must yield. Are we not aware of Ephesians 5:21? Though it speaks literally of a marriage of a man and his wife, it also speaks of our relationship with Yahusha Mashyach in the assembly, where Ephesians 5:21 talks about subjecting ourselves one to another. So sometimes there are things given to the brother, the sister, where they speak with the voice of the shepherd of the Spirit of Yahushua. Let me read John 10:11 through 15. It reads, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for his sheep. But the hireling, and not being a shepherd, one who does not own the sheep, sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and flees. And the wolf snatches the sheep and scatters them. How many of us during COVID-19 cannot find the pastor, the shepherd, the leader? How many of us have witnessed mores, teachers, prophets, and priests, and leaders among us disappear or become less available? How many of us have seen them maybe physically there among us, but they're not saying any words of preparation, of guidance on what we're supposed to do now and moving forward as end times intense? You see, my brothers and sisters, maybe their focus is not to yield to the Spirit of Yahushua, because if so, they would be willing to lay their life down as Yahushua directs, not just saying I'll give my life. They'll be ready to talk about the things that we should do and how we should govern ourselves, and not becoming absent or less accessible. John 10:14 say, I am the good shepherd, and I know mine, and mine know me. Yahushua knows his, and those that are his know him. So seek him continuously and daily on what to do during COVID-19, what to do during widespread disease, sickness, famine, and pestilence, what to do during wars and famine, food shortages, and unforeseen catastrophes. Let us know the voice of the shepherd as he speaks through his chosen shepherds who hold the reins as Yahushua has given. It says, even as the Father knows me and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. What are we being taught? What do we see being done, demonstrated? Yashar'al, my brothers and sisters, keep in mind how budding points represent beginnings. Beginnings of leaders that are being forged and fashioned and strengthened to endure to the very end. My brothers and sisters, it is important that we recognize all that the Almighty Father is saying to us and through us. Are we paying attention? Are we learning? Are we distracted? Or are we believing something is set apart because there are many others who believe it too. Bear with me a second here, my brothers and sisters. I needed to make some corrections here. This journey is a hard journey, my brothers and sisters, but it's not impossible. Okay, I believe I have corrected what was important. Budding points. Are you not happy to see life spring up in someone? Believe it or not, there are leaders who aren't so happy. There are leaders, my brothers and sisters, who will literally reject things that are set apart. Literally, my brothers and sisters, there are leaders who will reject things that are set apart. They will bear false witness against obedient ones at times. And I ask you, Yashar'al, can you identify? Do you think that's the leader you need to be with? One who distracts and bear false witness? One who deflect you from hearing what the voice of the Spirit of Yahuah might be saying to a brother or sister, young or old? Budding points represent beginnings. As end times ramp up, if we keep hearing the same thing over and over and over again, without instructions on how to strengthen and be able to endure what is coming before us, something's wrong. A warning is one thing, but if there are no instructions, if the leader's not even admitting, this is much as I know, I too, as you, seek to discern what the Spirit of Yahuah has to say so that I can give you more. If they don't say, if you believe your spirit is being stirred, share it so that we all can hear it. You see, the dynamics of seeking out to discern what the Spirit of Yahuah is saying sometimes require us to look at budding points, breakthroughs, where the sprout comes up. And we say, there's something that adds to the dynamics of becoming stronger and being able to endure. My brothers and sisters, what say you? It's time to understand the importance of purging times. You see, my brothers and sisters, there are times of pruning, times of purging, time to come away. Consider Matthew chapter 3, verse 8 through 10. It says, bear therefore fruits worthy of repentance, and do not think to say to yourselves, we have Abraham as father. For I say to you that the Almighty One is able to raise up children of Abraham from these stones. And the axe is already laid to the root of the trees. Every tree then, which does not bear good fruit, is cut down and thrown into the fire. Yashar'al, O Yashar'al, among the gathering of a set-apart nation, there will be those that will fall to the wayside. There will be those that will face destruction. Keep in mind, O Yashar'al, as the 144,000 in great multitude are being refined, disciplined, and prepared for the final days ahead, seeds begin to sprout, with some buds raising up before others. It's time to identify how leaders will spring up before us as they prove to be chosen of Abba Yahuah in Yahusha's name. In other words, as leaders are sprouting, as budding points pop up, it's time to recognize, is that the leader into this information that we need to have? Or is the shepherd receiving what they're saying and saying these are words of leadership? You see, budding points represent leaders of different stages rising up to fulfill specific duties. as well as individuals providing information that leads to the strengthening and reinforcing of those that are chosen by the Almighty Father. Yashar'al, Yashar'al, buds do not remain sprouts forever. They grow and they go. In other words, my brothers and sisters, as buds sprouts, as budding points bring about things that we need to strengthen, we don't grab it, and we should, well, at least we should not just grab what has refreshed us or refueled us or renewed us and stop there. We must pray without ceasing. We must continue to look for the things that brings about a nurturing. And just as a seed sprouts and grows into a tree, and that tree produces fruit, so are we obligated to continue to grow each day. And remember, my brothers and sisters, there comes times of separation. Matthew 19:29 and 30 said, and everyone who has left houses or brothers or sisters or father or mother or wife or children or lands for my name's sake shall receive 100-fold and shall inherit everlasting life. There comes a time of movement. There comes a time of purging. There comes a time of harvest. For Yahusha's name, let us be mindful of what to do and when to do it. It says, but many who are first shall be last, and the last shall be first. Every generation must be prepared for movement and separations, my brothers and sisters, as the awakened are gathered together. As the set-apart children begin to grow, we will find ourselves knowing that with growth comes time of movement, thus grow and go. Go forward in the mighty power and might of the Almighty Father in Yahusha's name. Yashar'al, it's time to identify set-apart budding points, breakthroughs. And I want to say to you, my brothers and sisters, set apart budding points. I want to say to you, my brothers and sisters, will prove to yield plans on what will be occurring. Ask yourselves this, my brothers and sisters. All that you believe that is happening, do you not believe that there are some details and processes that we must learn? Are you included in the plan? Is there a moray, a teacher, a leader, a pastor, a community head talking about specific plans? Even those that have come out of the urban cities that are in community, are they speaking of how they will vet if brothers was passing through? Do they speak of a journey, a time of being gathered from the four corners of the earth? Do they speak of how they have come out of the urban communities and they are prepared to receive brothers and sisters as they are brought to them? Do they speak about vetting? Do they speak about if they die or become disabled, how to receive those that come to them? Or do they think it's just as the virgins with the oil, and they just don't say, I got mine, you get yours? And they take that out of perspective. They take it out of context. Yashar'al, Yashar'al, each and every set-apart living child of the Almighty Father have a task and duties that come with responsibilities that are included within the plans. If you don't see plans that are reflective of strengthening, preparing, leading a set-apart nation into end-time prophecy fulfillment, something is wrong. And I say to you, when our forefathers came out of Mitzrayim or out of Egypt, when they came out of captivity during the days of Mashyach, Moses, it was no secret. Moses and Aharon didn't have a secret plan. They spoke boldly to the elders and to the children of Yashar'al up until their final breath. They executed the plans of the Almighty Father, and thus a set-apart nation was delivered. And so as it was in the days of old, so shall we see in the coming days ahead. If you search the stories, search the scriptures, my brothers and sisters, you will see that there are breakthroughs. There are plans, my brothers and sisters, that the Almighty Father has for his children. And we will witness such plans come to be. Are you ready, my brothers and sisters? Consider these words. Set apart plans contribute towards deliverance. You see, if we're in movement, if we're in motion, if we embrace that we are in end times, if there is the belief that there will be a final exodus, if there is expectation, if there are expectations leading to the return, physical return of Yahusha Mashyach, that means deliverance will come, O Yashar'al. And in that deliverance, physically, there will be relocation and lifestyle changes. It'll be those including those left behind. Let me ask you, as COVID-19 spread rampantly, as hospitals begin to pick and choose who's allowed in them, as conditions in various states, cities, counties, or province, or countries worsen, not just with COVID-19, but other spreading diseases or food shortages. Look around, O Yashar'al. Are there plans to contribute towards guiding you to where you're supposed to be? If you don't see anything that's helping you to discern how to prepare or when to move, something is wrong. I believe White Rose family has a plan. It's not the be-all plan, but I think it contributes to other plans that are out there that we just may not have heard or I may not have heard of. But know this, the Almighty Father knows the very intent. Consider this, wouldn't you want to be a part of a group that can identify and build teams of set-apart, proven leaders, proven to be chosen by the Spirit of the Almighty Father, led by the Spirit of the Almighty Yahuah in Yahusha's name? Wouldn't you want to be connected to someone that provides and develop an information and resource center where information is exchanged that satisfies practical and spiritual needs as directed by the Almighty Father? Wouldn't you want to see a group that build a team with diverse skill sets to mentor the unskilled and the unlearned and the dynamics of all that contributes towards the merging and coming together of a set-apart nation? Would you not want to identify, if we are to be gathered from the four corners of the earth, where is that exit point? And I believe whatever country we're in, it is the outermost border of that country that points to the promised land. As for those in the Western Hemisphere, I believe that exit point is in Virginia. Ask and discuss with others, where do you see us going and how do you see us getting there? Wouldn't you want to be connected to a plan that identify safe and support zones as we find ourselves moving towards that promised land? Wouldn't you want to be involved, engaged in a plan that provides guidance and support for completing the journey? Yashar'al. Do you not desire to be a part of something that provides guidance for this set-apart life and what to do as we find ourselves waiting on Yahusha Mashiach's physical return? I say to you, O Yashar'al, begin the discussion. Speak to those among us, my brothers and sisters. Let us speak and know what should be done, what must be done. With every plan, it comes a need to count the cost, my brothers and sisters. What are you doing right now? My brothers and sisters, In Matthew 25:14-30, it talks about it did not use the talent that was given him and how it was taken. So you hear me say, use it or lose it. Let us begin to identify the favor, the resources, the skills, the ability that we have acquired by favor from the Almighty Father Yahuah. Let us begin to look at what he has given us. I invite you to subscribe and share if you believe that I am presenting something that can be a benefit to a brother or sister. It may strengthen a brother and sister to give them the strength to support what you're trying to do. You ever experience where you tell someone something and they don't receive it, then somebody else tell them and they receive it and you say, that's the same thing I said? Well, so can it be with sharing and subscribing. A person examines and vets the messages I present. They may get something out of it that you didn't get that strengthens them to be able to further support you. You see, my brothers and sisters, there's all too often too much one-way action. What's in it for me and not what's in it for me, what's in it for Yashar'al, what's in it for each of us who are part of the set-apart body of the Almighty Father. What's in it to demonstrate the life of set-apartness before the world. Consider subscribing and share. I'm going to also ask you, will you help me? I am trying to build the subscriber for this channel to at least 100 so that I can more effectively manage this page in a more expeditious way. But only if you believe this asking is sincere, only if you believe it contributes towards the gathering of Yashar'al. Consider supporting, getting involved. Use your resources, supplies, skills, and or money. Examine, ask questions, discern, act. Speak to me, O Yashar'al. It's not about me, but I'm saying in fellowship, let us speak to the individuals that contribute towards the growing, the coming together. No, it's not about me, but it is about worship and true obedience to the Almighty Father. I've set up a Cash App, White Rose Family, if you care to contribute financially. If you want to know more about what is happening as it relates to the things I've presented, reach out, ask questions, let's talk. Let's vet one another. As it relates to the scriptures coming alive, as it relates to the building up of a set-apart nation. And I will say to you in advance, thank you, my brothers and sisters. Yashar'al, O Yashar'al. Budding points. Stages of the seed. You see, with each passing day, we grow, my brothers and sisters. The Most High promised discipline, vengeance, and wrath. Where will our position be in discipline? Where will we be as vengeance and wrath come? Look around. There are those who recognize uncertainty is growing. There are those looking for answers. Are you getting the answers that you need? Are you prepared? Are you preparing? Have you begun to act? Yashar'al, O Yashar'al. Budding points. Look for the breakthroughs. Look for the information that's coming from the Almighty Father that's breaking through quicker than some and ready for many. There are no rewind buttons as it relates to our actions. Sure, technology have rewind buttons, but the things we do, we cannot take it back and do it again in terms of to correct what happened yesterday. You see, the time has passed. How are we expensing our time each day? What are we doing, O Yashar'al? Can you recognize budding points? Can you recognize when the Spirit of Yahusha breaks through and you're like, aha, I didn't get that before? Can you recognize when it's happening with others? Or are you among those who reject the obedient? Are you among those who are as the Pharisees and Sadducees who rejected the prophets from days of old, who were obedient? Let us, O Yashar'al, begin to understand each moment there are certain things required of us. Budding points. Protect them, guard them, watch them. And you may identify someone that is being groomed and refined to actually lead. Or you may see budding points within those who are chosen leaders, mores, teachers, community heads that are anointed by the Almighty Father versus those who are just trying to build something for themselves. Can you discern between the ravenous wolf and the true sheep? Can you discern between the belligerent and the unmature versus the set apart one that is led? Can you discern the brother who at some point may have been anointed but stumbled and fall and now is on a trajectory that leads to their demise? And if so, is the Spirit of Yahushua leading you to correct them? I'm going to say to you right now, there are some brothers, sisters, there are some mores, there are some teachers among us that will face physical death in the coming days ahead because they are obstacles in what is to come. And I say to you, if this applies to you, get your house in order. For your day, if you are a set apart brother or sister, your day of sleep, your day of being physically removed is coming. If you fail to yield to correction and reproof, if you're using scriptures to try to give you an excuse to why you're not yielding to reproof or correction, it will not continue to be, for the very physical life you have will be taken from you. If you are elder, more, teacher, leader, community head, prepare to witness what the discipline of the Almighty Father is to refine you to do what is right. But if you are one who is set on being belligerent, set on trying to just establish a name for yourself, set on trying to establish a community for yourself, if you are one who's trying to establish a camp, a fellowship, a group, with your names or logos or banners that represents you, that are contrary to the scriptures, and you will not release and relent, prepare to meet your maker. These are end times, my brothers and sisters, and no one, nor group, nor community, nor fellowship, nor camp can stop what is about to happen. All these different individual banners and people saying this is my ministry, all of that is opposed as an obstacle to what the Almighty Father is doing is about to cease. Will there be wicked camps that will not? Will there be wicked fellowships? Will there be wicked communities? Will there be wicked individuals that will continue? Sure they will. But the children of the Almighty Father trust this, that in Yahuwah's discipline, he will give us the strength and fortitude to come away, as well as the strength and fortitude to know how to purge the things that present themselves as obstacles, as we are called by the Almighty Father. On that note, O Yashar'al, budding points, see the breakthroughs, see those who are receiving information and instructions as to what to do now and going forward. I salute your patience, your tolerance, your pursuit of set apartness. And I have no doubt that the Almighty Father's plan will be successful. Until next time, O Yashar'al, I say to you, Shalum.